to me, the cemetery of forgotten books is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the preservation of memory, of ideas, of language, of books, of culture, of the world of the mind, of independent thinking. And this idea came to me when I was concerned about these things, and to me came this visual idea of a fantastic library, a labyrinth of books that embodied that idea, that spirit. But as a place, it doesn't exist. Although there are places that resemble vaguely that. Sometimes you find huge old second-hand bookstores. I used to remember one in California that sadly closed down called Acres of Books. It was in Long Beach, in the harbor area of Los Angeles. And I used to go there very often. And it was kind of a small cemetery of forgotten books in itself. And there are other places I've known across the years that have that thing, but there's not the one. Although many people seem to think there exists, and sometimes people bring up a map of Barcelona to me and say, hey, you know, two months from now I'm going to be there, and could you point exactly where it is because I want to visit it? And I said, well, it does not exist. You know, the Cemetery of Forgotten Books is a fantasy, it's an idea. And even years ago, I remember that the mayor of Barcelona, in a speech, he joked, said, hey, so many people want this place to be real that maybe we should build it. The next day, some newspaper printed on the front page, City Hall is going to build a cemetery of forgotten books. And they had to go, no, this was a joke. We're not going to build this place. But then there was a company that wanted to build it. And I didn't grant them permission because I thought it was a kitsch idea. This is something of the mind, and I don't want a kind of attraction sideshow of it. But I think it's interesting, and the very fact that people want this place to be real. And in my experience, which was very interesting, and I learned many things, one of the things that I learned is that I prefer to keep my own personal world, my own characters, my books, my things outside of that process, which is an industrial process, which it tends to destroy authorship, despite the religious theories about the auteur theory and things like that assume that movies are made by one person or something like that, which is complete bullshit. And on top of that, in the case especially of these three books and the next one to follow, to me, all of these books are about really books, about readers, about writers, about the culture of what books mean. And to me there would be something wrong, and although I know it sounds naive, but it would be something wrong to try to transform it into something else. Because it kind of pisses me off that everything has to become a movie and a TV series and a video game. And there's nothing wrong with these mediums. They're extremely brilliant, and there's brilliant work in each one of them. But I say, why everything has to become something else? What is wrong? It's like, you know, having musicals based on movies that were based on musicals in the first place, and say, why can't we do original work in each one of these fields? And to me, because of the nature of these books, because they're about readers, because they're about literature, because they're the written language, because they're about style, to me the right thing is to keep them as they are, as novels. And also because, due to my experience as a screenwriter, there are many things I've learned about the language of imagery, of sounds, of the sequence, of construction. And to me, the best film version of this movie is already built in the books, and you're going to see it projected in the theater of your mind, in Dolby Stereo, and the best possible solution. And they're designed to play in different layers, but this is one of the layers. So to me, it would be pointless to make a movie of these books, and the only reason to do so would be money. And there's nothing wrong with money, it buys freedom. But in this case, I think that the money I'm not making by now selling them is the price I pay to keep them as I feel they should be kept. So there will never be movies based on these books because I own them and I don't want to do that. I would suggest contemporary reading because usually it's very easy to go back in the classics. Yeah, everybody loves, yeah, I read Shakespeare and stuff. Of course, this stuff is great. But for instance, I would recommend whom I think is the greatest living writer to my own eyes, which is Joyce Carol Oates. And I think she's not as popular a writer as she should be. Maybe she's in Italy, I'm not aware of that. But my impression is that while she's a well-known writer around the world, she could be much more well-known. And I think she's a genius, and I think her work is extremely rich and wonderful. And I would recommend anybody to go out there and read Joyce Carol Oates. I would also recommend the work of John le Carré, which I think that despite the fact that many people see him as just a spy thriller writer, I don't think he's such thing. I think he's one of the greatest writers of the last 50 years. It just happens that he writes spy stories. Why? Because he had some experience there and he uses that as his platform. He has created a world around that. But just as a writer, his craft, the way he builds things, I think it's outstanding. And then I think there are many other interesting things going on right now. There are younger generations. There was a movement a few years ago that's still pretty much alive, especially I think in the UK, called the New Weird. And the New Weird, and there were a number of, some of this came from the work of a writer called M. John Harrison, a science fiction writer. But I think some writers, like probably the most famous of them all is a writer called China Miéville. China Miéville is an extraordinary writer, and there are many like him in the same sensibility, what is called the New Weird, that I would recommend readers that are not familiar with to explore.